Marie, thanks for having me. So great to be here.
It's always great to talk to you. You are calling in from Seattle. Am I right about that?
Olympia, about an hour and a half south of Seattle. Yeah.
Okay. So you're in Olympia. And you're on Pacific time. I'm in Brooklyn. I'm on Eastern time. If you're watching, if you're just tuning in, let us know where you're listening from. Last week we had somebody from the south of Wales. The week before that we had somebody watching from Australia, which was pretty cool. So I love to have these international conversations here. And we're live right now on LinkedIn and on Facebook and also on YouTube. So awesome. Well, thank you for being here. This, of course, is Coffee with Entrepreneurs Live. And today we're going to be talking about your ghostwriting business, which I'm really excited about. And also your podcast and how you've developed that as part of your entrepreneurship.
I'm looking forward to it.
First question that I ask everybody, and I'm going to ask this of the folks watching as well. And we have somebody watching from super exotic Texas.
Oh yeah,
I love
Texas.
That. So all over the U.S. it seems like. So first question, which I ask everybody, and I'm going to ask of the audience too. How do you take your coffee? And if you don't drink coffee, how do you start your day?
Yeah, I'm guilty on this one, Marie, because I haven't drank coffee for several years now, which might sound like a sacrilege to some, but I use a combination. I'm a bodybuilder in my spare time, so I use a combination of branched chain amino acids and then the Bang energy drink that really gets me going in the morning.
That's awesome. So that sounds like it's some sort of energy inducing thing, but it's probably even healthier than coffee.
Well, I'll put it this way: it's better than Red Bull. That's the thing. I don't, when I started looking at the label, there's caffeine in it, obviously, but there's also the amino acids that my body needs, the CoQ10, which is really good for brain functionality, and a bunch of other stuff. It's not coming to me right now. If I had a can in front of me, I'd read it to you. But yeah, it's really helpful.
Nice. We're going to have to talk offline about that because, so I do a little bit of powerlifting. And of course,
That's right.
I had some aspirations to start competing, but of course, COVID, now nobody's doing anything. So we're going to have to talk about what you drink in the morning. Because if it's better than Red Bull, then I need it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we have some folks from London, from Los Angeles, from Florida. Folks, how do you take your coffee? Or if you don't drink coffee, what do you start your morning with? I love finding out how people start their day because that's the stuff of entrepreneur life, right? That's what gives us our energy, and it's really important. Awesome. So, Paul, tell everybody a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and where you are now and what you're doing.
Oh, this is a fun one to tell because, like many people, I think I had an entrepreneurial spirit long before I actually wielded the title, but I knew so little about it. And, becoming an entrepreneur to me is not simply about changing job titles, but it's about taking on a whole new version of yourself. It's an upgrade in many ways in how you think. I've heard some people talk about it as you go from asking the question, what's in it for me, to asking, when people buy something, why do they buy it? And that's really what begins to distinguish it. You asked me about the journey. That's really a lot of what the journey has been, is I've changed my questions. And it started out with, boy, I hear it, people are making money in the online space. How can I make money? And it's evolved to how, it's a privilege to wake up in the morning and serve God's other children. How can I serve them best? In a way that allows me to feed my family and do all that, but also in a way that allows me to be, to take generosity to new levels.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that definition because, I hear it too from people who want to be entrepreneurs, right? Or interested in changing jobs. They say, well, how can I do what you did? and or you know, why isn't it working for me, or whatever the question is, you know. And the answer is, you know, what makes you an entrepreneur is serving others, right? So you have a business when you have a client or several, or whatever the case is. So I love the way you've put it, because you truly are waking up every day and thinking, well, how can I serve others?
Yeah, you know, I don't know how much time we have to go into this, but I have a great little object lesson that will help anybody listening. And that is my sons, who are ages 11 and 9, kept coming to my wife and I and saying, we want to get this video game, or we want this toy, or whatever. And we said, well, okay, if you can afford it, you can have it. Right? And they didn't know what to say to that at first. But over time, they began to ask a better question, which was, well, we don't have money, so how can we afford it? You have the money. And I said, yeah, but we're not going to give it to you. In fact, the money that you need is outside that door. And so they said, what do you mean? I said, well, you see the lawnmower sitting there in the garage? And they said, yes. I said, well, push that lawnmower down the street and start knocking on doors and ask if you can cut their grass for free. Don't ask for money. Just ask if you can cut their grass because you want to go out and do something nice for someone. And they said, okay. And they went down the street and they came back with $75.
Wow.
Right?
That's amazing. So explain that to me. How did that work? They said they would do it for free, and people said no, you could do it for money.
Well, you know, adults love to see little kids doing mature things that are beyond their years. So there's that side of it. It's much easier to do this when you're 9 than when you're 29.
Sure.
Right? But the principle's the same. And here's when, after they'd done this a few times, they came back and said, Dad, we got this money. I said, great. I said, why do you think they paid you? And they said, because we cut their grass. I said, no, that's not why they paid you. And they kind of frowned. And I said, I hearkened back to a lesson I've been teaching them about the meaning of the word value, right? When we talk about adding value, people get it's kind of vague, right? Yeah. And I said, you placed a value on the time, the energy, maybe somebody's bad back or sore knees, an elderly lady's difficulty pushing a lawnmower. You placed a value on removing that obstacle or that weight from them. In other words, you said, my time and my muscles and my energy are more valuable to that person than they are sitting here playing video games.
Yeah.
And that forces that reciprocity in that adult to say, you know what, you're right, it is. Here's some money. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden they began to understand, when I say add value, that means you go out and do for that person what they already have to do, don't really want to do, or don't really have the time or the talent or whatever to do. And watch what happens when you do that consistently enough for somebody. Eventually somebody else is going to say, hey, I need that too, and I'm willing to pay.
Right. I love that. What a beautiful lesson for your children. And they're always going to remember that. And to have that instilled at 9, to understand that, the way that you make money, right? The way that you serve people is you add value. What an entrepreneurial spirit that you've instilled in your kids. That's wonderful.
Well, the thing that is the most encouraging about it is my 9-year-old, the younger one, has that personality of a extroverted just rides roughshod over what everybody says. I know what I want and I'm going to get it. And then he's really big social and he has a lot of friends and all that. So I can see him going like into real estate or something and just nice. Just having a really fun career.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really great. So tell us a little bit about your business. What are you doing how are you serving these days?
Great question. Well, so to put it simply, I'm an executive ghostwriter. And that's where I'm starting, but it's not where I'm finishing. So particularly if you are of the Judeo-Christian faith, although that's not exclusive, I work with people who are outside that as well. And you are a thought leader or coach consultant or executive of some sort, and you want to put what's in your head on paper. or in a book or in social media posts or in email marketing, copywriting, all that kind of stuff. If you're building a funnel to attract more people into your sales funnel and you need copy written for that, that's my specialty, is words and people. And so what I find for a lot of these people is they simply, they have the treasure, right? They have the money. They may even have the talent, but what they never seem to have enough of is time.
Right.
And so I come alongside them, and I have the ability, also being the mimic, right? The guy who can imitate people's voices and do impressions of people. I have the ability to listen to how someone speaks, imitate it, then write something out and read it back to myself while imitating their voice to say, does this sound like something that person would say? And it helps, I suppose, that most of my clients are characters with distinct accents and all that anyway. But even if they're not, I can hear the tonality. I can hear how I read it and say, does this come across very smoothly and thoughtfully the way this person would speak? And so when you have that ability, right, it's very different from being a ghostwriter, a content writer on a site like Fiverr or Upwork. No disrespect to any of those platforms. Right. Mm-hmm. But you have the ability to really become somebody else in print and channel their thoughts so that they have done for you content that they can, and maybe they make a few tweaks here and there, but other than that, they just plug it and play it.
I love that. And what you're talking about, the way you put it sounds very easy. But the truth is, that's so easier said than done. Yes.
In the sense that I don't know where my ability to mimic voices came from. One day I started doing it, right, as a kid. I would listen repetitively to stand-up comedy routines when I was a kid by guys like Bill Cosby or Hal Roach, and then I'd memorize them. And I could say them and deliver them with the same kind of timing and vocal intonation and all that. And that, I don't know where that came from, Marie. Nobody ever told me to do that. I just did it.
Yeah.
The writing side of it, I think a lot of people can learn to do better with writing than they do. But then you get to the creative level where you have a lifetime of experiences and all of this perspective that I have from all the different travels that I've been on, cultures that I've lived in, people I've interacted with. And so some people describe my writing. I think they go a little bit overboard, but they say, I've never seen anybody write like that. And I'm like, well, I didn't make it up on my own. I learned how to do it from other people who write like that.
Right.
But not everybody has the appetite to learn that kind of writing either.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you kind of stumbled on this as a calling. That's, I'm hearing you talk about it, and I hear, kind of that like accidental, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yes, the tools were in my hand long before the knowledge of what to do with them. Yeah. is the way I like to put it. I could mimic voices and I could write long before I understood, you can actually make a living at this.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's great. So how did you fall into this? You've had the ability for much longer than you've been doing this, right? So was this how you intended to start your entrepreneurial journey?
No, not in the slightest. And it's good that you asked that, because when I started out, I had come out of the property casualty insurance business. And what had really worked for me there was what I'm carrying forward with my podcast and my book. And that is, I had this ability, set of principles that governed my interactions, I guess you would say, that kept thrusting me into these situations where I was like, I'm standing in a room and I'm like, I have no business being in this room. And I'm standing talking to people I have no business talking to, right? And I couldn't figure out why. I was like, well, how do I get invited? And other people who knew me would see me there and say, what are you doing here? And I'd say, I don't know. I don't really know how.
Yeah.
Right. And I quickly figured out there's this proverb that goes, a lizard can be caught with the hand, but you find it in kings' palaces. And it's not describing the animal so much as it's using the qualities of the animal to describe a certain type of person. And I just have this ability, background, personality, I don't know, it's a combination of things. People would invite me to exclusive gatherings. They'd invite me to meet people that nobody else could get in front of. And then when I showed up, I had productive conversations that led to business with them. And so I was going to take that as sort of I don't know, maybe I was trying to do a coaching or consulting thing, but it's very difficult to pin down as a list of specific things.
Right.
And it's more something that you do as a lifestyle, and then you just watch crops spring up all around you, and you're like, where'd that come from, right? So I couldn't really distill it into something like a compelling offer, but I've persisted with it anyway, and that's what my book and my podcast are about, is teaching people, look, if you do this kind of stuff long enough, consistently enough, with a benevolent heart that's not seeking, that's not just out to make a buck, but genuinely wants to serve other people, eventually you're going to end up in front of the person who wants to go 1,000 miles deep relationship-wise with you, right? So what happened to me was I was out there struggling. I started out trying to do coaching. Then it was like, I'll just become I'll just sell 1 million books or something. And then it was trying to build a mastermind group without all of the credibility and the established track record that I needed to do that kind of mastermind. And eventually in the fall, about this time last year, I had back on my show for a second interview a gentleman by the name of Aaron Walker, who leads this Iron Sharpens Iron mastermind. And in between his first and second interviews, I had done what I always did, right? I'd introduced him to this person and that person and this person. Oh, you need to meet this person. And never asked for anything in return. So when he came on the show the second time, we did the interview, it went great, and then we were on the post-interview chat, and he says, you need to let me do something for you. And I said, what do you mean? He said, look, you've introduced me to all these incredible people. I would have never known them if you hadn't done that. You need to let me do something for you. And I was at a point where I was ready to just be frank and honest that I was failing and wasn't making any money and all that. And he said, well, what's something you could do for me? I said, well, I don't know if you need this, but I've always been a talented writer.
Yeah.
And he said, as a matter of fact, I do need a writer for my team. So I went in, we worked out a way that I could join his mastermind. I could start writing content for his team. Well, what happened was now he starts cranking out a blog every week, memes all month, Alexa briefs every day. And all the other people who know him are like, yeah, no, this is too much content for one person as busy as you are to produce. Right? So what's the secret here? What's really going on? And he told them. And that was like, 17 months into the journey, I had not made any income. And then January of 2020, clock ticks over, new month, new year. And I've got my first client from the mastermind wanted me to come and write some email content for him. And so I finally had a paying client. And then 3 weeks later, I had like 3 or 4 more.
That's
and
fantastic.
Yeah, everything turned around almost in the blink of an eye.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And first of all, congratulations. I mean, the step from, doing this and not having the income and maybe not having the right target and that kind of thing into figuring out what people want from you and figuring out what the market wants from you, is it's so important and it's so hard to get there. So first of all, congratulations. That's huge. but I love it because, you know, it's a beautiful example of sometimes, you know, you have to get out of your own way, right? You have to you have to say like, okay, maybe the market wants something else from me, you know, and you had the opportunity to do that with this.
Yeah, and I don't know that I've discussed this when you and I have talked before, Marie, but my entire journey, and this is, you know, this is why I have sympathy. Oddly enough, I tend to have sympathy for people most other people don't have sympathy for, and it really has to do, you know, I hearken back to the spiritual language because that's what I use. It has to do with my pride. It's nothing more than that. It's just this pride, this sort of, I'll figure it out on my own. I don't need anybody. I can, you know, and what entrepreneurs, particularly seeking to provide the marketplace a solution, what they really need to be able to do is get out of their own way, as you said, and say, they don't really want that. They're telling me what they want, but I'm not listening. I'm telling them what I think they should have.
Right.
And no wonder they're not whipping out their wallets.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And a lot of times what I see with especially newer entrepreneurs, and, you know, like you're talking about your own pride, but we all have that, right? Mm-hmm. And I see this a lot with newer entrepreneurs. They build something and nobody comes, right? And then they're like, "Oh, I failed. Okay, well, what's wrong with them? They didn't buy from me." Well, no, it could be that, you know, the nuance of your offer wasn't right. So you have to listen. You know, you have to have that conversation, and it's a beautiful thing when you finally do get it right.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you know, the way I look at the world now versus the way I used to look at it, I understand why we have to go through that.
Yeah.
The design, the whole intent of economic interaction between us is based on the fact that no one of us has every single thing we need. Right? If you go back to like at the works of Adam Smith when he was writing about the free market, the invisible hand, and the wealth of nations, he said it's specialization that makes the Western economy, if you will, so enormously powerful. Is that we don't have subsistence farmers trying to raise every kind of crop and deal with every single kind of problem that's coming up. No, some people are really good at this, some people are really good at that, some people are really good at that. And we divide up the labor among those who are great at it.
Right.
Right? And then we trade with one another. And that's what facilitates all of this growth and all of this economic strength that we have. So you have to adapt to that, and you have to say, okay, I know I'm good at this, but there's a bunch of other stuff I'm not good at. So I need to figure out, how do I take what I'm good at and match it to what the market is telling me they need, not what I think they should have,
right,
not what I really dream of doing right now, though you may get a chance to do that one day. You got to take what level am I at entry level, or am I at elder statesman level? Because the two just command a different audience and a different degree of compensation.
Yeah, no, you're so right, and you know it's wonderful because we don't often talk about this, right? As entrepreneurs, like we're so caught up in our own thing. What you have with your referral, you know, your basic referral network, you know, through this first client that you helped out and, you know, traded and got into the mastermind and everything like that, you've proven your value, and now you've hit pay dirt, right? Because people see your value, word of mouth happens, and that's the best way to grow. So it's wonderful. Yeah. For those, we have some comments. I would if anybody has any questions for Paul or anything like that, please do type them in the chat. We have quite an active chat today, so this is pretty awesome. I don't know if you could see it on your end.
Yeah, I do. I
So.
see we got quite a few comments there.
Yeah, it's great. So if anybody has any questions or anything that they want to add to the conversation, please do add them, and we'll let you join in here. So who's your ideal client then? Who do you like to work with? What sorts of subjects do you like to work with, or does it matter?
Yeah, so a lot of people out there have dreamed of writing a book. So these people are influential people, executives, they're entrepreneurs. They have all this knowledge in their head, but again, the clock just keeps ticking.
Mm-hmm.
And I have several clients like this right now, and we're working very slowly through the steps,
Yeah.
getting towards where they want to write a book. So books are a big one, especially if you're marketing any kind of high ticket offer where somebody's paying tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a great credibility tool that you can use.
Yeah.
And they sound a lot more complicated than they are. I don't know what gets into people's heads, but the process of writing is actually not that difficult. And the best part is, if you don't have time to do it, then you don't have to. You can go through an extensive interviewing process where we map out what the book's going to be about. And then after that, the writing, the editing, the publishing, the marketing, all of that. I work with a couple of partner publishing houses, and we can engineer all of that for you. But there are other people. They don't necessarily need a book. They've got they just want to proliferate content all over the internet. So they have needs like blogs, and they want to create videos that they want scripted, and they need to do a lot of email marketing. Also, people who are developing apps, websites, or funnels. All of those things, if they're to any degree interactive with the marketplace, which usually they are, then they're going to want copy for every page, that comes up. Especially if it's funnels and they're trying to move people through a process. And there's advertising to be written, there's articles to be written, there's sales pages, all landing pages, you name it.
Yeah.
So we do all of that. And then other than that, I've had a few unusual clients too. I've even been asked to humanize debt collection letters from a debt collector firm, and I did it. And from everything they told me, it was actually improving the results. So,
well, if that's not the good mark of a good copywriter, I don't know.
if you can help the debt collecting lawyers sound more compassionate, you got something going for you.
That's wonderful. Wow. All right. If I had any, I didn't have any doubt, but if I had any doubt, that just sold me.
Yeah, there you go.
That's awesome. We have a question here. Do you have any specific business philosophies like B Corp or conscious capitalism?
I'm not familiar with B Corp. Conscious capitalism, I'm good friends with Corey Blake, who, thanks to you, I love what he's doing. I love what Safwan Shah does with PayActive. In fact, no, I better not. Just I'm sworn by confidentiality. I'll just say that Safwan and I took part in a really good conversation that led some very cool places, and
nice.
for all the right reasons to help all the right people.
Awesome.
So yeah, absolutely love that. Safwan uses one of my favorite verses. I don't remember the chapter and the verse from Deuteronomy that says, "Pay the worker the day he does the work."
Yep.
And I'm like, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. No wonder we got so many people broke.
Yeah.
And now that he's found a way to do that, I think it's just spectacular. So, I couldn't comment on it extensively. I can just say everything that I've come across, most everything that I've seen from Corey or Safwan, I've loved.
Yeah, agreed. And I have to say, just knowing Safwan and seeing what PayActive does, they've reached, they're helping cab drivers in New York get paid right now, and they're doing all this really beautiful stuff. And I have to say, it's funny that Deuteronomy quote. I actually started paying my freelancers weekly once I read that. I was like, okay, all right, well, I have to put my money where my mouth is, literally, and so I said, that's it. We're going on a weekly pay schedule.
Yep.
Because it's true. I mean, your workers need their money, right? And it's such a basic tenet. Conscious capitalism is a lot of the work that they do is about being a kind leader and leading with purpose. So I'm glad you're involved with them, and conscious capitalism does some really great work as well. So that's awesome.
I don't want to get too theological here, but I'll just share one of my favorite Hebrew words, and this is used throughout the Bible, and the word is tzaddik, and it's used when speaking of the great patriarchs, the great men of the Bible, in particular, who were known for that, who were known for being, they were very successful, but they were also very, very generous and very concerned about the welfare of all the people around them. Particularly if you read like Boaz in the Book of Ruth.
Yep.
That's exactly how he's characterized, and that's pretty much I've kind of set that up as my lofty goal to achieve one day.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. So you did mention that you have a lot of Judeo-Christian clients. Is that something that's is that sort of your ideal work, or do you have sort of a larger client base?
I find it I find myself very fluent in their language, particularly in their why, right? Which is always, like Simon Sinek says, begin with why, right?
Yeah, and that's really important.
But I haven't found it necessarily limited there. For example, my largest client right now is in Hawaii. Not particularly very fine people to work with and for. No complaints whatsoever about them, just not particularly involved with church or anything like that. But nonetheless, I find the same principles keep getting woven into it. And so when we're writing content, we're talking about very much the same thing that I would be talking about, or that I would talk with friends of mine who also attend church about, as it undergirds business. And so it's strange that I see that the lines, tend to blur after a while, because we're all discovering the same general principles are at work in the world we're in, whether you believe in what the Bible says or not. That same sort of principle comes into play whether you believe or not, and people are benefiting from it.
So it sounds like you work with people who lead with purpose in one way or another, whether it's via religion or spirituality, or whether it's via something like conscious capitalism or something similar to that.
Yeah, if Corey asked me to write something, for example, I could learn that language very easily.
Yeah.
Because I already found myself, as soon as I heard it, I was like, of course. I mean, that's absolutely what I believe. Right. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about your podcast. That's how you and I met. Via your podcast, because I was doing podcast booking, and we found your podcast. And one of the things that I really love about your work is you ask really smart questions, and you're also this really wonderful connector. You're really thoughtful about who else in your network might benefit from meeting your guests and your friends and your colleagues and everything like that. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this was probably October, November of 2018, and I was in a very high-priced mastermind at the time. And I knew how to podcast. I had tried it back like in 2009, 2010. So I knew how to record myself talking into a microphone. I knew all the bits and pieces I had to have. But what I didn't know was how to make it interesting and attractive to people. So my mentor at the time in that mastermind, Vince Del Monte, was the guy who told me, no, you don't sit there babbling into the mic. You need to be interviewing people. And I said, who? And he said, look at the network you've got built around you, interview them. And I said, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. So, in fact, he's the one who came up with the title, Influencer Networking Secrets. And that was, that was nearly 2 years ago now. And so I rolled with it. I knew enough to know that I didn't know what I should be calling the show or what I should be doing with it. And during all that time, Marie, all that time that I was not making any money and failing and struggling and all that, my podcast was the only thing that was growing. And it should have told me something. It was telling me something. The problem was I couldn't decode what it was.
Right.
So I don't mean to say this all the time. This is not a uniform principle, but it's a general one. When you take the position of the interviewer, the inquisitor, right, the person asking the questions and trying to get to the gold,
right,
in the person you're interviewing, it's I don't mean to demean it, but it's what I would compare to taking the lower seat at the table. Right. In other words, the person that I'm interviewing most of the time tends to be much further along, much more developed, especially in an area where I'm weak. And that's what makes me curious about it, is like, how does that work? What goes into this, Right. So, conveniently at the time, another friend of mine was, who manages a podcast agency, gave me a format that I could follow, to make all of those interviews go in generally the same direction. And so what happens is, when you go and listen to the episodes, you'll find each guest ends up answering their own version of these kind of overarching questions that deal with those classic journalist, right? Who, what, where, when, why, and how type of questions.
Yeah.
Now, I suppose you could say, to some extent, I make them a little bit more interesting in how I frame them. I can hold a conversation with another entrepreneur for quite a bit longer, and get to some really interesting points, or, especially if you have like a really strong guest like Safwan, and I had it was a nuclear bomb of an interview.
Awesome.
When he came on.
Awesome.
But I would just say, conversations are what lead to business, right? It all starts with a conversation. Anything like that, relationships, right? It all starts with a conversation.
Sure.
And then it continues with somebody who understands how to have a good conversation. And so, I was finally able to announce, after all that time, early this year, that I had in fact monetized my podcast, because a couple of my guests became clients, even though I'd interviewed them last year. So it worked out.
Nice. That's awesome. Where can we listen to your podcast?
Anywhere fine podcasts are sold. You can look up Influencer Networking Secrets Podcast, iTunes. I have it on Spotify. I've got it on several of these aggregator sites. I forget what all they're called now. I just know that they're programmed to receive my RSS feed.
Nice. Awesome. And if someone wants to work with you, how can they get in touch with you?
I have a website, thepaulS, as in Simon, Edwards.com. Matter of fact, we're going to create a special URL here. So it'll be thepaulsedwards.com/coffee with entrepreneurs, because I am giving away a free copy of my book to anybody who would like one. And you can get a digital copy, or if you'd prefer a physical copy, we can arrange that as well. On that end, I just ask that you help pay for the shipping, but the book itself is free. And I can get that. I'll get you that link right after this so you can include it.
Excellent. Sounds great. And so this feed will be live. So if you have any follow-up questions for Paul, be sure to ask them in the comments, and we'll be popping back in. And of course, we'll put the giveaway in the copy after this. And so I like to end with the question: what should I have asked you that I haven't?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see. I would love to talk a little bit more about just how, not getting into any super specific details, but how the relationship evolved for you and I, because I remember quite out of the blue getting my first emails from you introducing guys like Corey and Ron, and then having them on the show, and they did wonderful jobs as interviews, and that was terrific. But then eventually you and I invited you on the show.
Yep.
And we went on so long, we had to divide it into 2 episodes.
Yeah.
We found we could go quite the distance there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, we just kept finding reasons to pop back up on the radar. And that always tells me, the more people reciprocate, show up, when you're doing what I teach people to do in the book,
Right.
The likelier it is that you're dealing with that avatar of a person that I'm looking for and looking to become, which I call the radically generous entrepreneur.
I love that. And I appreciate that. And it's true, because a lot of us kind of talk the talk, but I find that you're one of those people that walk the walk, right? You are really thoughtful about who you introduce people to. You're thoughtful about following up and everything like that. It's a really beautiful thing, and it's rare. It's really rare. So I think you truly are a radically generous entrepreneur, and it's really wonderful to see somebody who really not only writes about it but lives that.
Well, thank you for that. I give glory to God for that. But I'll say that you're absolutely right. This is actually not that hard to do, but it is a matter of habits, and habits are hard to form and hard to break.
Yeah.
And both you and I make it look easy, and in fact, once you get used to it, it's very easy. But the getting used to it is not.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'll say about it is that we've been talking, for what, 2 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. If you've had your podcast since 2018, it's got to be at least that long, right?
Getting close to it, yeah.
So that's, when you build these relationships, it's not like, I had this conversation with you. I asked you to do something for me yesterday, and now you're on the podcast. You know what I mean? Like, this is over time. You have to give space to these relationships to grow, because really beautiful things can happen 2, 3, 5 years down the line. If you don't approach it in a "what can you do for me" kind of way.
Yeah. If I've got time, I got one thing to add to that you triggered in me, and that is my latest expression that I use to help people begin to grasp this concept is what I call it: focus on the invisible. And people are like, well, how can I focus on something I can't see? And I'm like, exactly.
Yeah.
But what I mean is, like, when I see you, or when I see any person, I know, because I believe that human beings are living, breathing stories. I know that you weren't born yesterday. Right? Behind you is a whole litany of stories, some good, some not so good. In between, right here in the middle, in the last couple of weeks and in the couple of weeks ahead, is where you're currently at. And then way out into the future, for who knows how long, is where you're going.
Right.
And all of that is invisible. And everybody, 99.9% of people who show up to a networking event or a chamber function or whatever, they have no clue that's going on.
Right, and they don't think about it either.
You be the one person who does, changes everything.
Right.
about other people, not about yourself, right?
Right.
I hasten to add. But you begin to ask the questions that encourage that person to start telling their story. Well, now you're flying below the surface.
Right.
Now it's not just idle chit chat. Hey, how you doing? Okay, nice to see you. Right? It matters.
Yeah, and that's something that you do so effectively on your podcast. I mean, I listening to the conversations that you've had with Corey and Safwan and everybody like that, and even with me, you ask questions that most people, you ask questions that light people up, you know, and
Yeah.
that's it sounds simple, but it's so not. And, you know, if you can do that, what a game changer.
Yeah, I don't like swimming in the shallow end.
Yeah.
So so I don't. I mean, if I can't be in the deep end, I don't want to get in the pool.
Yeah, I love that. Good stuff. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a really wonderful conversation, as always.
Hey, anytime I get to talk to you, Marie, is a good day. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks everybody who tuned in and asked questions. And you know, be sure to reach out to me on social media or on my website. I'm always happy to chat and meet new people.
Sounds good. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Marie.